Welcome to Conflict to Connection, the podcast that helps families navigate separation with compassion and understanding. I'm Mitch, a child consultant at Civilized Separations, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Bill and Bella. Together, we tackle tough conversations about divorce, co-parenting, and creating healthier family dynamics. Whether you're navigating a separation or just looking for better ways to connect, this podcast is here to guide you every step of the way. Today, we're exploring the topic of how to tell your children you're getting divorced. As always, I'm joined by Bill, a post-separation family repair specialist and founder of Civilized Separations, and Bella, our lead child consultant at Civilized Separations.
Hello.
Hello. So I'm going to jump right in. Bella, as our most kind of experienced child consultant here at Civilized Separations, I'm sure you've kind of discussed with a lot of parents and children about the difficulties of having that first conversation about getting a divorce, what that means for the family, what happens next. What is that like? I'm sure they're worried about it going into that first step.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just such a scary idea, sitting the children down and letting them have that news and making sure that it's done properly, and properly in the sense that that they're kind of okay, they've got all the information that they need, and the parents are feeling secure about the plans. Where do we go from here after the conversation? Then what? And unfortunately, it is a really scary thing, and which means that sometimes it doesn't always go well. And the reality is that you can actually have a conversation with the children that's pretty good. It can actually invoke a lot of excitement and optimism for the future if it's handled well. I suppose that's what we're hoping to tell our listeners today, that it doesn't have to be such a scary process, that there are actually steps you can put in place to make sure that everyone's had their voice heard and everyone's okay. And so I suppose the sort of main umbrella over the top of it, I guess, the theme that you're wanting to really let the children hear and feel is that this is actually what's best for the entire family. And it might look a little bit different. Obviously, we've all been living under the same roof, and now we're not going to be doing that. It is going to be different, but it's the best thing for the family. And everyone is going to benefit from us deciding to actually go our separate ways. And also it's what's best for us. Because I think that is potentially something that gets lost as well. Parents, make the children the forefront of everything, and they forget to look after themselves during the process.
So say, for example, I'd been in a long-term relationship where I was married and we had kids. And we were having a bit of a hard time, and we decide that now it's time to get divorced. And we've made that decision, but we haven't told the kids yet. And we come to you guys and we're iffing and butting. We're not really sure it's the best thing to tell them. What would you say to them? Would you say, because what I'm hearing from you is that you would recommend saying to your children that you're getting a divorce at that point. Would you say that was a good thing? Would you say, let's speak to them?
Yeah, definitely. At the point of separation is when you want to be sitting down and having that conversation with the children. And I suppose the sort of scary reality is that the children are probably already aware that it's going to happen. And so creating that conversation and allowing the children to sort of have that moment, they can process it, they can actually, start to, I suppose, imagine what life will be now. They've heard the information, they've kind of been expecting it anyway, and now they can start to think about what things are going to look like. And the more that the parents are there to help them and support them through that particular process, answer questions. If they have a question about something, answer it really confidently. Let them know that you're going to be okay. This is fine. You've got all the answers. Trust me, we're good. We've already thought about this. because it gives children that sense of security and that sense of safety, I suppose. I don't need to put this on my shoulders. I don't need to worry because my parents seem to have this under control. I'm a little bit nervous about what it's going to look like, but they're giving me a sense that that this is going to be all right.
I'm interested in the first point that you made there, that they likely already know that this is coming, or something's gone wrong. So in your experience, they are obviously observing you. They already kind of know what you're feeling, even though I'm assuming that most parents are hiding that from their kids or trying not to show that to their children. Michael doesn't know that we're having fights or something's going wrong. Is that common?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I suppose some people might think the children don't actively hear us arguing, and so therefore they are completely none the wiser to any of the conflict that's existing. Another unfortunate truth, I suppose, is that children are, of course they're observant, but they're far more intelligent than a lot of adults give children credit for. They've been practicing. They've been studying their parents since they were babies, so they know when something is on their minds. They can read it in their faces. They can tell from their body language. They can pick up on it in their parents' demeanor. So even if there isn't any verbal, arguing in front of the children, that does not mean that the children are completely unaware of the conflict. They can sense it. They can literally feel it as soon as the parents walk in the room. And so I suppose it's not to scare people or anything like that. We're all humans, but I suppose it's coming back to that knowledge. Children are far more intelligent than a lot of adults give them credit for. And so a lot of parents sort of think, after they sort of hear from the children, they might think, oh, I didn't realize that they were actually picking up on so much.
I mean, they basically been assessing their parents' capacity to parent them from pretty much the moment they're born. So they're very good at picking up on the tiniest cues. And I think sometimes there's a difference between what they're hearing and what they're seeing. So sometimes they're hearing things are okay, but they're feeling, it doesn't feel that okay to me. It doesn't feel like when you're in each other's company that feels all that relaxing or that calm, or you don't seem to be enjoying each other's company as much as I would like you to as a kid. So I think sometimes there's an incongruence between saying everything's okay, but actually the kid thinks, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not entirely sure I'm convinced. That can kind of miscue them somewhat.
Yeah, be a bit confusing. Almost.
Yeah.
And if I was listening to this podcast and I was a listener and I was thinking, that's all well and good, and I really want to be able to do that for my kids. I want to be able to do this really lovely talk with them about how good it's going to be. But I don't see that. I cannot see that. It's too much. It's too stressful. We've got court cases coming up and we're fighting all the time, and we can't even, me and my husband can't even sit down in the room together at this point. Is that at that point, would you still say, yeah, let's talk to the kids, let's tell them this now?
No, because they're more attuned to how you feel than what you say. It's probably a good idea to not force this idea of we must have a conversation with the children together. It's essential. They'll be messed up if we don't. There's not really any solid foundation to that thinking. If you had a scenario where mum and dad were both telling the children, look, this is what's happening, and their sense was, well, dad seems completely fine and happy and looking forward to it and smiling all over his face, and mum looks devastated, that's not at all reassuring. So in many ways, I think if you think it's a good idea to tell them at the same time together, okay, well, then you're going to have to make sure that you are genuinely okay in each other's company, so that that sense of the feeling that you exude is congruent and calming, and the kids are getting a message that says they seem to be okay about this. So whatever I'm hearing, they seem to be okay about it. They're more interested in how okay are you both with what's happening than what's happening. Sure, they want to know what house they're going to live in and will they have their own bedroom and stuff like that. But the thing they're most interested in is, are you going to be able to bring out the best in each other? Are you going to be able to kind of enhance each other's parenting capacity? If you are able to make each other feel really great, then that's my biggest interest and my biggest concern, because your state of mind is what matters most to me. So I'd say if you don't feel that happy in each other's company, I don't know why it's really essential to tell them at the same time. So maybe you could tell them separately and be comfortable within yourself. I think that's probably preferable than soldiering on and having an awful time and having them think, what's wrong with you guys, while you're telling them? Because you're trying to say, look, what's going to be happening in the future is going to be much better because we're going to be in a much better place. And so your experience of us is going to be better. We're going to be calmer. We're going to be happier. We're going to be more attentive. We're going to be more attuned to you. We're going to be lighter because we're changing our living arrangement. The family's changing shape into a better form than it's been in the past. So we should all be feeling quite enthusiastic about the future that's coming.
And I think I would, on that, mention that I think a lot of parents might feel the pressure kind of building because their children are actually already starting to ask questions. So sometimes they might ask something that really just catches you off guard, and you just think, oh my gosh, they are aware of what's going on. And one or both parents might think, well, we need to have it with them soon because they're already asking questions. They're already onto us. So realistically, we should actually sit down with them really quickly and just, set the record straight. But we're still not okay within ourselves. Like, I'm still really devastated. I'm still not at that point where I can actually accept this and then be okay with the decision in myself and then have the conversation with the children. I suppose it probably it might be a bit, I suppose, kind of contradicting because we're saying at the point of separation is probably the best time to mention it to the children. But really, you want to do it when you're ready and when you're feeling okay. And so I suppose it might seem as though it's a very, very difficult situation to grasp. But I suppose that's the beauty of remembering the children's welfare and kind of coming back to earth because, as you mentioned, when people are in the middle of the court process and they have financial plans they need to sort through, they need to talk about the child arrangements, they need to figure out what's happening with the mother-in-law and, this sort of thing. It can be such a chaotic time and, all the while you feel like you're shielding it from the children. The reality is that you're probably not. Okay, look, it's okay, you're human. And quite a lot of the time, the two parents are actually eager for their children to have the same outcome, that they both want them to thrive, they both want them to be doing really well at school, and they both want them to be making good friends, and they both want them to be really confident and happy and just smiling all the time and, that sort of thing. And so when you kind of refocus on the children and you remember that you actually have that in common, that you really love your kids and you just want them to be happy, it can kind of push all that other stuff to the back of your mind, which in a way is probably quite freeing. It might be kind of a bit of a sort of weight off your shoulders to just like, I'm not going to think about that right now. I love my kids,
Yeah, and you want what's best for them.
Exactly.
Do best by them. And say that we come to the point, whether that's individually, as you were saying, or together, that we want to have this conversation with them because we feel like it's the right time. We feel like they should know there's a lot of other stuff going on that they need to know about. And whether you do that solely or together, whatever way works for you, I'm kind of thinking more about the practicalities of that. Like, what does that actually look like? How do we have that conversation? Because I can imagine as someone who's about to step into that room with their kids and what do I say? What do I do? So kind of, I was thinking about the do's and don'ts. Why don't we start with the don'ts? What is something that we shouldn't do?
I was thinking you shouldn't give your own personal take on who's at fault.
Right.
You certainly shouldn't distress them by indicating a lack of parental unity by saying that someone's behaved badly or someone's let us down, someone's leaving us, someone doesn't care about us. That would be a very harsh way to convey that fact that the separation's occurring.
Okay, so like not fronting blame to someone,
Yeah,
to
not
the
saying
other
it's so and
partner.
so's fault.
Right.
That would be very difficult because children would instantly experience a very scary sense of the unit that I need to look after me looks fractured,
Okay.
and therefore that's got me worried.
Yeah, children are not concerned with who's to blame.
They'd rather not, yeah.
Yeah.
They'd rather not get drawn into that. Otherwise, they'll find themselves feeling a need to align themselves with one, kind of look after one to the detriment of the other.
And because I feel like there's often that question of why. Kids will ask questions, probably say why, what happened, what's going on. How do we do that without asserting blame?
A why question will definitely lead to blame.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's a difficult one to answer, but like I feel like that's what I would ask. Why is this happening? What's going on?
Yeah, well, I think if a why question comes up, you just need to turn it into a how question. I suppose as a parent, if you were asked a why question by a child, you'd end up possibly blaming the other person
Yeah.
because of the nature of the question. So it's more a case of how are we going to do things in the future, and perhaps how come this has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes some children really like the idea of kind of a contract from the parents where they both say, look, we know what it was like for you when things were difficult between us. We've got the ability to be aware of that. We want you to know that in the future, we'll be taking responsibility for our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to take responsibility to make sure that we keep an eye on ourselves.
So kind of going into the conversation, the kind of one way to front it, I suppose, or say is, we're gonna take charge again. We're gonna come together and be good parents and look after you. It's kind of that sense of security that we're taking this off your shoulders. You guys can be kids again. You go
Yeah.
off and do your thing, and we'll be the parents. Because at that point where they feel like their whole world is falling apart, the children as is that enough to get them to kind of to the point
Well,
where it's
hopefully
not?
they're not feeling it's. I mean, yes, certainly. I sometimes say to people, imagine that one of the parents, got an amazing job in another country,
Okay.
and look, it's going to be inconvenient. There's going to be aspects to it that we're obviously have to kind of change things, but it's all very exciting. We're all really kind of up for it. Why can't we start to look at separation in that way? Like we've all agreed that it's a good idea. Well, maybe not, haven't both agreed, but one way or another, we're going to separate. So how we decide to look at it is to some extent up to us. Like we could look at this as a great opportunity to live a life that's more in accordance with what we need. Like when we got together initially, that was what we wanted. That's what we needed. Time's passed. Now it's not. We're looking forward to creating a new world. This family is going to take a new shape. We don't have to look at it as some sort of terrible disaster where everybody's failed and it's all, bad news. We don't really have to look at it. I mean, I know if you're hurt, it's very hard to kind of look at it like that, or disappointed or angry. I know. But how we look at it, how we frame it, the language you use to describe what life's going to be like, to a large extent determines the children how they should feel about it. So if you kind of say we're reshaping the family to a new form, we realise that the old shape wasn't working, so we're going to do things differently. We're going to live in separate houses. All the good stuff that you've really loved about the family will stay in place. No need for us to throw anything out. We can recreate the new version of this family. It's up to us. And that's, I think, why it's such a good idea to be party to a process where you can come and craft the new family together.
It's really interesting when you talk about that, about, this is just reshaping. It's just something new that we need to move forward to. It's just the next step. It's a positive, optimistic outlook. What if at that point, because I feel like in my experience of observing quite a few number of families now, sometimes I can find that one parent has kind of the children's hold. They're the one that is kind of has the backs of the child a bit more. The children are like, we're with mum on
Maybe
this.
spent more time
Maybe
with
spent more
mum.
time with
Yeah.
mum. And now dad's feeling a little bit more alienated. They've kind of had this conversation now that they're going to get divorced, they're going to get split. And really it's all just all the kids are on mum's side and dad's kind
Mm.
of left on the sideline a little bit.
Mm.
When you're having that conversation about divorce, and that could be a factor of it, this could happen. What do we do in that situation to avoid that happening, to avoid that kind of alienation? Because I often feel like there is one parent that people might side with slightly, the children might side with, because you're going through this traumatic experience. You need someone to hold on to. You need a why. You need a reason. You need a blame. So how do we avoid that? Is that by kind of having this optimistic new approach of, this is just us changing the look of the family, this optimism around it? Is that the easiest way forward with that situation?
Yes. I mean, I think, again, if you frame what's happening in language that is non-blaming and also has a sense of future and a sense of positivity and a sense of optimism about it, you can prevent the children needing to feel a sense of needing to align themselves with someone. I think if they're asked to align themselves, it seems that the family requires them to take a side.
Mm,
They're pragmatic, they're realistic, they've got to live somewhere, they've got to have, someone's got to look
exactly.
after them. So they'll align themselves with the person who seems most likely to do that. They won't find themselves joining sides if they're not really asked to. They'd ideally like to float
Okay.
between both. I mean, sure, they've always been a bit closer to one parent than another. It's just, lots of families, one of the kids is very close to dad, one of the kids is
Mm,
very close to mum's, just they've got similar interests or similar take on the world, similar sort of personality. But if they're not asked to join a side, they probably won't feel the need to.
Mm.
mm,
And also, it's an interesting concept. It's an enormous topic, the
mm,
whole kind of concept of alienation. My feeling's always been that it's taken both parents have played a role in bringing about this phenomena. Often, you'll find that one parent was closer to the children anyway prior to separation, is sharing a lot about how they feel. And maybe the other parent's not doing a brilliant job at maintaining that ongoing attunement with the children. Like maybe that person was often away and at work, and so the
mm,
roles just settled into they were with one parent more than the other. And maybe that was okay because the way the system worked, that person was appreciated even though they were away a lot. Everyone was glad or happy that they were doing that role. Then suddenly, when separation occurs, all of a sudden, that person who used to be away a lot because they were working is now perceived as some cold, indifferent person who doesn't care or love the children. Now, if that person doesn't manage that well and looks like they are perpetuating that understanding that the kids have of them, like they're distant or they don't really spend much time tuning into the kids and making the kids feel they understand them, they can see them, they're aware of them, then that perception on the children's that this person is indifferent to me, has left the house. The other parent's always been there for me and is now here for me while all this has happened, can create that very binary scenario. So I think both parents can stop that, or at least reduce the likelihood of that concept of one parent being more loving or more loved than the other. You can do something about that.
And yeah, I mean, unfortunately, what can happen as well is if there is this dynamic where the children are, maybe unintentionally being alienated um, with the other parent, if they're sort of aligning with one and they're pushing the other one out because the one that they're with all the time is maybe sharing a bit too much, is kind of demonstrating a lot of sadness and, that sort of narrative that that parent really hurt this parent. That's just not okay. And we need
mm,
to, we need to get behind them. We need to make sure that they feel really supported. Unfortunately, as the children get older, they may actually resent the parent that alienated the other one because they may get to an age and think, I actually don't really have a very close relationship with that other parent. And now that I reflect, I actually felt like I wasn't able to. I would feel guilty if I reached out to the other parent. Or, that they'd always have that look at their face when I came home from the other
Mm.
parent's house. They always looked sad. They always, they went to their room and they needed time alone and things like that. And it just, you know, eventually it means that I actually didn't have a close relationship with that other parent. And so it can actually be detrimental to the parent that they're with all the time in their future relationships with the kids. Yeah, so as you're saying, making sure that it's just really even and very equal, and there's a how rather than answering why. Why are you guys leaving, or why is dad leaving? Instead of saying, well, because he's the one that had the affair, or, turn it into, it's going to be logistically better if I stay in this house and dad goes to that house because, my work's closer to this house. And, I don't know, I've spent lots of time decorating our room and I love it. And I just love your bedrooms here and I love this neighborhood. And it makes more sense for dad because it's going to be just easier for him. So turn it into it makes sense,
Mm.
logistically it makes sense.
And it's from that point, it sounds like you're saying it's a lot more about like how you say it, what the tone is,
Yeah.
what you're feeling, rather than kind of what you're saying. Because I've noticed that a lot of parents bring up, we might just try and stay in the same household for a while
Mm-hmm.
whilst we're getting the divorce, just easier on the children. We don't want them moving between two homes. In your experience, does that actually affect the kids that much in terms of staying in the house or going to two households? Is it as hard as parents say it is on their children?
I think it's definitely better if you just start the process, if you actually just separate, because
So physically
physically
moving.
move, yeah,
Wow, okay.
definitely. Because if I understand, parents are always trying to protect their children. They're always thinking about what is best for them. So they think, well, let's just not change too much about their routine. Let's keep things familiar,
Yeah.
even though we don't love each other anymore and we've actually agreed to separate. That's actually, it's very painful for the parents. And so the children are living in that pain and they're seeing it.
Right.
And things become very difficult. It's so hard to move on when you're actually living with the person that you're trying to get away from. Not trying to get away from, but it's time. The relationship has
Yeah.
ended. It's come to its end. Definitely, for your own sake, just yeah, definitely, just separate because you're only hurting yourself. Like for example, if there's a lever and a left, which sometimes can happen, if there's
Yeah.
someone who wanted it a little bit more than the other one, if you're living together and you're the one that's being left is aware, this divorce is definitely happening, this separation is over, I'm actually thinking that they might be seeing someone else already. Every morning that the leaver goes to work, the one that's being left is just being broken up with again and again and again. It's just this constant reminder, they're leaving me, they're leaving me, they're leaving me. It's so painful. It's just such a sad process, and it's important to move on. It's important to actually put the separation logistically in place so that you can move on. How can you move on if you see their face every day? You know.
Mm.
So yeah, I think
I think
it's kind of
there's definitely good things that come with separation. You're beginning to construct your new life. You're beginning to kind of think about who you're going to be and what sort of life you're going to have. So things start when you separate. If you kind of separate but not, you don't really begin the process of how am I going to be or who am I going to be, because to a large extent, you're not in that place. You're not in that sort of geographical place. I mean, reality, some places are so expensive that people can't afford to move out, and they can't
Yeah.
afford to get another house the same as the one they're living in. So there are sort of financial constraints sometimes on um, being able to move out, to being able to separate. I think in that scenario, you'd have to come to a very sophisticated understanding with each other that would maintain an ongoing sense for the children that you're okay. And that's not that hard to do. You just need to articulate, okay, so look, we're going to have to live in the same house because there's nothing we can do about this. How are we going to make sure that we both feel okay? How are we going to make sure that we don't get hurt every day? How are we going to make sure that there isn't an intense sense of unhappiness, in the house? How are we going to navigate that? And if both people were to kind of say to each other, well, look, it would probably really work for me if you could do this thing. Like, suppose we do a breakfast thing. It would really work for me if in the mornings we both kind of don't sort of see each other too much. So let's take it in turns or whatever. Because I can't really take that emotion. You know, I know I'm supposed to, and I know I'm supposed to get used to this, but I haven't got there yet. So it would really help me if you could do blah. And the other one would go, well, actually, now we're talking about it, would really help me if you did blah. So often there are ways of making sure that you construct a way of being in the house that's easier than it otherwise would be. It's not going to be great necessarily, but sometimes there are other
Sometimes you've got no
factors in
choice.
play that mean that you can't,
Of course.
you know, you both got to keep going to work. You might be living in some big expensive city and just can't afford.
And you'd say that was the same in trying to get to that point where you can discuss with the kids in a kind of a good mindset, whether that's separately or together. Is that kind of a similar thing, similar conversation, similar way of going forward, you know, discussing with them, well, we should handle it like this. This is what we should do collectively. Is that the best way to move forward? Is that, because I'm thinking, you know, if we're at the point where I'm not actually sure, I want to do this for the child's sake, but I honestly, I don't know how I'm going to work with this person to be able to do this. How do I do that? How do
Yeah.
what do I say to get us to work together for this, for our child's sake? We both want to do that. We're both got this really intense parental factor that we want to do what's best for our children, but how do we get there? Like, how do we even just put that into motion? What do we say?
The thing is that you're going to make up your mind about how you're going to feel in someone else's company within a microsecond of seeing them, or you're even going to have a sense of what it's going to be like with them before you've seen them. So if you walked into the kitchen, let's suppose we've got this tense scenario, you know, we need to separate, but we can't yet. And I'm going to walk into the kitchen and see that person's face. Now, to a large extent, the look on their face is going to determine how this is going to go. You know, is that person going to look at me in a way that makes me feel okay? Or is that person going to look at me in a way that makes me feel upset or complicated or hurt or whatever? So if you could both find out what sort of look would you like when I first walk in to help me manage this as much as I can, or how much would you like me to do so that you can manage this? You can minimize the upset. Because you think about, why is it upsetting to see someone's face after you've decided to separate? Well, it might be that they're looking really jolly and happy and that they can't wait to go and see someone else. Well, that would be hurtful. So they could really help by not doing that. Or you might walk in looking really miserable and the other person's going to feel really guilty. You could help with that. You could make sure that you didn't walk in looking really miserable. You know, these are all just ways of mitigating the intensity of the emotion, bearing in mind that we work out how to feel by looking at how someone seems to be feeling about us. So it's not as complicated as it seems. It's just a case of finding out. Would it really work for you if I kind of smiled a lot when you worked in, or would it really work for you if I just kind of acted as if you were there but I didn't make a big deal of it? Like, just give me some clues here. I'm happy for this to work, but I'd like to know, what do you need for this to go well? And that applies to the relationship in the future. The post-separation parenting alliance is governed by those fundamental understandings. How would we be with each other if we were both thinking, this is okay?
So it's perfect to kind of start that off literally at the forefront, going, how do we do this process together? Even if it's a hard process, even if it's the divorce and the fact that we have to tell the kids, and we don't want to do this together necessarily, but we're going to do it for the kids' sake because this is what makes us strong and we're a united front here in our separation. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to make the separation work for us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Articulate it, say it, talk about what it would be like if it was good. There's always so much conversation around separation about what's not good.
Yeah.
You know, all this risk averse kind of process where everybody's being very careful to make sure that they don't get disadvantaged or in some way mistreated or taken for granted. And there's not a lot of conversation around separation about how amazing life's going to be now that we are shifting into a new shape of family. I mean, we should be optimistic and excited about what's coming. We're going through all this awful hurt and upset to get to this place. We should be heading somewhere better, not heading somewhere worse.
Yeah, exactly. That makes so much sense. And That's exactly what you were saying to say to the kids.
Yeah.
It's that sense of, we're not doing this because it's going to be worse down the line.
It's going to be
Yeah.
better.
We're doing this because it's going to be better, even if it's tough.
Yeah.
We're gonna get to a better point in the end.
Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We hope that you found it interesting and we learned something new that maybe you can try in your own relationships. If this episode resonated with you, subscribe to Conflict to Connection and share it with someone who might benefit. And you can also find us on resources on our website at civilizedseparations.co.uk. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.